Hello and welcome to this presentation on teaching with technology, which is subtitled A Conversation with People. And my name is Clive Buckley and I work at Glyndŵr University. I'm recording this presentation in December 2014 and it's based on a professional development session I held with postgraduate certificate in professional development students at Glyndŵr University in November 2014. The subheading, A Conversation with People, is deliberate. And there are two reasons for this. One, which I hope will become evident as we work through the presentation, but the other is that the session with the students was meant to be a conversation, a dialogue with them, but unfortunately, as this is a recording, I'm afraid this is a one-way conversation, so my apologies for that. I should point out at the very start that all the images I'm using here are Creative Commons, and I give full credit for the images on the last two slides of this presentation, but I'd like to acknowledge my gratitude to the photographers who make their photographic work available in this way. Before we start the presentation properly, I would like to ask you to undertake a little activity, which is on the next slide. And I'd like you to maybe pause the video for a second or two, just consider this image and to think of a single word that comes to mind when you see this image. What does it convey to you? Okay, I'll let you pause the video there. You have a word in mind. There's no right or wrong answer here, but some of my students come up with the word compassion. Others, caring. And still others, communication. As I say, there's no right or wrong answer, but what's happening is actually communication. If you look at the image closely to the right-hand side, you'll see, maybe make out a computer keyboard. It looks a bit dated, but it's a computer keyboard. And the lady in the foreground, the hands, you can see the back of the hands that you can see there, is learning how to use a computer. And she's blind and deaf. And she's in a class, and off camera, there's a tutor who's giving instructions, explaining how to use a computer. And the other lady who's touching the hands is, I guess, translating. She's using a form of touch sign language and explaining to the other lady how to use the computer. And I think it's a very emotive, very compassionate, very caring photograph. And really it sums up what I'm going to say about using technology. It's about communication and breaking down barriers and making communication accessible. I think that's an important message. So this is not going to be about technology. It's going to be about using the technology to communicate and to support learning. Yeah, geek. It's definitely not about being a geek. It's not about the technology. And in fact, what constitutes a geek has changed over the years. And maybe 10 years ago, someone who was interested in computing would be considered a geek. But actually, we're nearly all geeks these days. We all use smartphones, we all use tablets, we all use the computer. And being a geek, it was an offensive term, I guess, back then. But now, if you're not a geek, you're actually on the outside. The geeks have inherited the earth. It's about, all students are now using technology, and if you're not using technology, you're on the outside and not seen as different. So this presentation is not about the technology. It's not about explaining how to use technology. It's about the learning, how we can use technology to improve, enhance and support learning. So what we'll be looking at, well, mainly it's about teaching and studying online, although elements of this can be used in the classroom, but it's about online teaching, online studying. I guess my question to you is rhetorical in a way. Are you thinking about using technology in your teaching? I guess you wouldn't be watching this video if you weren't. But if you are thinking about technology in teaching, what are the drivers? Why are you thinking about going online? What are the intrinsic, your internal drivers? Why do you want to do this personally? What are the institutional drivers that you have? Maybe your university or college institution pushing to go online. Could even be beyond the institution to government drivers that are moving education, studying, learning in the online environment. And this guy actually is a New York taxi driver to explain the link with drivers. Where there are drivers, there inevitably are barriers. What are the barriers? Why? What are the difficulties in using technology, moving online? What are the difficulties? When I ask students this question, they often say a lack of technical expertise. And really, you don't really need high technical skills to develop online material. If you can use applications like Microsoft Office, then there's no reason why you can't go online. And if you can extend that into audio or video, but the medium is very flexible to various types of delivery. The other thing that comes up often is time, lack of time, and I think that is valid. It does take time to produce an online course. It's neither simple nor quick, and it really takes a lot of preparation. So if you're thinking about moving a course online, think about the time involved. Think about delivering in a classroom, the time that takes, and probably multiply that by 5, because that's the time it takes to do it properly. You might be skeptical. Certainly if the drivers are institutional or external to your institution, they're extrinsic, they're not intrinsic to yourself, you might be urged to go online against your wishes, and you may be skeptical about the online medium. You might think that teaching occurs in a physical classroom, and there are lots of people like that. At this point, I'm going to show you a short video. Martin Bean, way back in 2009, so it's 5 years ago now, at the ALT-C conference, a keynote speech that he made, A Journey in Innovation, and you'll see the URL there if you want to watch the full video. Again, it's Creative Commons and reuse is allowed. In this video, I'm not going to spoil it by explaining it now, but Martin explores the issue of skepticism in terms of educational innovation.
But right now, a pretty big piece of it. And I think what's really interesting is that, you know, we think that this skepticism that people have about technology today is something new. So I thought I'd just share a few sound bites for you that I brought with me from the United States. The first is from a teachers' conference in 1703, which by American standards is a long time ago, okay? So I know that's yesterday here, but by American standards, that's a long time ago. So students today can't prepare bark to calculate their problems. They depend on their slates, which are more expensive. What will they do when the slate is dropped and it breaks? They will be unable to write. But it's okay, because things got better. Fast forward to 1815. Students today depend on paper too much. They don't know how to write on a slate without getting chalk dust all over themselves. They can't clean a slate properly. What will they do when they run out of paper? But it's okay now. In 1907, students today depend too much upon ink. They don't know how to use a penknife to sharpen a pencil. Pen and ink will never replace the pencil. But we get more enlightened. In 1928, students today depend upon store-bought ink. They don't know how to make their own. When they run out of ink, they will be unable to write words or ciphers until their next trip to the settlement. This is a sad commentary on modern education. And then in 1941, students today depend on these expensive fountain pens. They no longer write with a straight pen and nib. We parents must not allow them to wallow in such luxury to the detriment of learning how to cope in the real business world, which is not so extravagant. And then in 1950, ballpoint pens will be the ruin of education in our country. Students use these devices and throw them away. The American value of thrift and frugality are being discarded. Businesses and banks will never allow such expensive luxuries. Ironic, isn't
it? Okay, if you're teaching in higher education, then the truth is that your students, and I may have been underestimating this, all your students aged 25 or younger, maybe even older than 25, have never known a world without the internet. And that's a remarkable thing to consider. They've never experienced a world where the internet didn't exist. In my lifetime, I guess it would be the same as the TV. So therefore, the internet has as much commonality with their experiences as the TV has for me, or perhaps the radio for older people. They have an expectation, and this image actually is purely taken there because it's amusing. But they have an expectation that you will use technology. If you're teaching in higher education, your students have an expectation that you use technology, you'll use the internet to support them and to support their learning. Some tweets from Twitter, one of my favorite tools. And I hate to read things out to people because, you know, you obviously can read, but I love a couple of quotes. These were taken from 2013. And, you know, when I was your age, iPads didn't even exist. That's now a history lesson. And 9-year-old asking, what's a browser? Because the term is now redundant. Nobody uses the term browser now. Although when I first heard it, I didn't know what it meant, but... question I put to my students, and I should explain my students are new lecturers at a university, and I ask them how they're using technology, and often they'll come back and say Moodle, you know, VLE, Moodle is, you know, we're using technology, Moodle, and I think this is a quote from Professor Julie Salmon, and apologise if I've given the wrong attribution to this. But using a virtual learning environment is no longer innovative. It's not new. It's expected. What is innovative is how you use that virtual learning environment. And unfortunately, too many people use it simply as a storage space for documents. Rather than give handouts in hard copy, they store them online and expect the students to just download them. And that's fine if you're simply doing face-to-face lecturing. You're not attempting to move the teaching, the studying, the learning online. If you're just using it as a place where students can get their handouts, that's fine. But if you're using the online environment as a teaching tool, then that's not fine. So some words about designing online or blended learning courses. And I think the next slide, Professor Rick Bennett, I think from Australia, has said that people behave in a different way online. And I know from experience that people who are perhaps quiet, perhaps shy, introverted in a physical classroom will actually become leaders online, become charismatic. The Facebook generation, if you like, that they excel in the online environment. It frees them from their shyness. You know, the shackles of shyness are thrown off and they're able to contribute and participate. Of course, for others, they find the environment difficult, but was ever thus, whether it be a physical classroom or online, people will respond to different locations, I guess. But you need to bear that in mind, that people may behave differently. Which means you have to think differently. The great Steve Jobs of Apple here, you need to think differently. You have to consider how the medium is going to influence how you teach. You're going to have to think how it affects the students and how they study. What is it about the medium that you can exploit to support your students to best effect? What is it about the medium that is actually a barrier for student learning? What works well online and what doesn't work well? These are things you have to consider. It's not just a case of repeating what you do in the classroom online. If, for example, if you have a PowerPoint that works well in the classroom, then the chances are it won't work well online, because if it did, what were you doing in the classroom presenting? It's, a different medium. And it's about unlocking that medium. It's about using the medium to its best purpose. There's a lot of talk about blended learning. It's not a term I particularly like, but blended learning, where some of the learning and teaching occurs in a classroom and some occurs online. Has this term blended, although a student of mine corrected me in saying that some of the best whiskies were blended. It's superior to single blends. Some words about blended learning approaches. Number one, I think most important, is you do not duplicate online what you do in the classroom. That's confusing students. What is online must be separate, must be different, must replace what you would normally do in the classroom. By all means have supplementary material, but if you're going to put some of the course, some of your modules, some of your teaching online, then that's where it belongs. That's what it is. It's not replication, duplication of what happens in the classroom. Okay, you need to have that distinction between the two. Some ideas, and these are my ideas, and you are free to agree or disagree with this. This is just my philosophy of moving online. And first, I put the issue of self, and for me, this is paramount. Whether you're the teacher or the student, it's essential that you have your online identity. You have to have yourself there. If you teach in a classroom, when you come into a classroom, you bring your characteristics, you bring your charisma, you bring your personality into that classroom. If you're going to teach online, you have to bring that personality, that charisma, those characteristics to your online delivery. And that means your online resources must reflect you. And a fundamental difference, I see it in the way that we would write or prepare material. Certainly my perspective is that very often when we produce material for use in the classroom, it is very formal. We write in a very formal way, and we enhance that by adding our personality, by adding our interpretation. Online, you need to have that interpretation, that personality embedded, integrated with the material that you're producing. So if you're writing for an online course, I think it's very important that you inject yourself into those documents, that you write those documents, the original documents to you, and you make them informal, you make them personal, and you make them project yourself, your personality, your characteristics. Equally for the student, it's important that they give themselves a sense of identity early on, that they are individuals, they have an individual character, they have characteristics. They're not just another student. They are who they are, as they would in the physical classroom. But as I mentioned earlier, that online persona, that personality online, may differ from their physical persona, their physical life. But that issue of self is very important. And counterintuitive, so is the essence of community. I've heard it said that students study online can feel isolated, and I guess that can be true in some cases. But it's very important, if you're a tutor, if you're a coach, a teacher, teaching an online course, that you establish, facilitate and develop the essence of community, that you bring your students in, that they feel part of a community, that they feel part of a community of practice, a community of scholars, a community of students. But you facilitate that. You use whatever means, whether it be forums or synchronous communication, you engage the students to ensure that they feel part of a group that are studying together. And that means that you have to be part of that community. You have to be there with them. So it can be very time intensive. If you're using forums and you expect students to be posting to forums, then you have to be in there. If you're expecting students to post every day, then you have to post every day. You have to be present. So it's this combination of issue of self, demonstrating you're there, demonstrating your characteristics, demonstrating your personality, but also facilitating a sense of community. And that's the end of my presentation. And I'd like to thank you for bearing with me. So my name's Clive Buckley. I work at Glyndŵr University in North Wales. And the next two slides are the image and video credits. Some of the videos I haven't included in this presentation, but my thanks to the photographers. I'll leave these on the screen for a few seconds. And in the spirit of Creative Commons and open educational resources, this video is obviously available on YouTube, and the PowerPoint presentation is also available if you'd like to download that. Thank you again.